Hello, everyone. This is Meister, the BitcoinMeister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to the One Bitcoin Show. Today is January the 24th of 2024. Wow. Strong hand, long-term thinking. Bitcoin is next Bitcoin. Bitcoin always returns to its all-time high. One day closer to an all-time high. In motion, value your wealth in Bitcoin. I'm offended by selling. All right. That's enough sayings for today. Hello, my elite friends. We've got a special show for you here today. Mark Jeftovic is here. He is the Bitcoin capitalist. All right. He's in Canada. He has really started his own businesses before. He sees this from a unique beast experience perspective. He's not some 24-year-old kid, with no experience in the world telling you how to run the world. No, this dude has seen it. Okay. He knows about government regulations. He knows about the do-gooders like the so-called do-gooders like Elizabeth Warren, who are just there to help you. Now, Mark, you have inspired me with your latest tweet, actually, about artificial intelligence. And I think we might be on the same page here. I see some of our so-called elites, and I don't really consider Klaus Schwab and those dudes at the World Economic Forum elites. I consider us elites because we actually hold Bitcoin. That's the rarest of the rare. But these dudes, all right, cool. They want to call themselves elite. They want to control the world. They think they know how to micromanage every little thing. They want to micromanage freaking artificial intelligence. I find it as the ultimate scare tactic to, weasel their way into trying to take over the world through a very undemocratic method. So expand upon your AI and tweet, and we'll tie it into Bitcoin.
Sure. So thanks for having me on the show, Adam. I just lost your video signal. Oh, you're back. But so before we went live, I just sort of made an off-the-cuff tweet in response to a thread on Twitter. I guess you call it X now. I still call it Twitter. Maybe I'm aging myself. But it was a reference to an old short video called Slaughterbots, where it was a sort of a dramatic docudrama sort of depiction of what would happen in a near future scenario where you could weaponize like micro drones for an assassination, and then there's a terrorist attack depicted in it, and then I'm sorry, I forget her name, who posted that. And then she posted a follow-up, which seemed to be live aerial footage of an actual poor soul being blown up by a weaponized drone. And what I said about that is this technology, I mean, to her point, the first video, the depiction, the short movie Slaughterbots, that technology is already here and there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. And to her point, she showed like a live video or like a video from the present era doing exactly that. And it's diffused. It's not centralized. It's not controlled by anybody. And my extrapolation from that is that we live in a world now that's like has this momentum towards decentralization, whether anyone likes it or not. Like, it really doesn't matter if you could make the most cogent case, undeniable logic, just can't dispute it for any sort of premise that requires complete centralization and 100% compliance or conformance by the entire global population. It's a non-starter. It's just not going to happen because that's not the way the world works. And so we live, I say this frequently, we live in essentially an out of control world, right? There's no central control. The WEF is not in control. Davos is not in control. Your government is not in control. And people find that prospect, a lot of people think that that's more terrifying than living in a dystopian top-down Orwellian society. because they just want someone to be in charge, but nobody's in charge. Like, you're in charge of how you react to what happens to you, and that is it. That's the only thing anybody in the world controls. Now, there's these levers, right? These levers all over the place that elites use and the ultra wealthy use, and that garners them outsized influence. And so they look like these super powerful, shadowy cabals of people that move mountains and tectonic plates of entire geopolitical arrangements. But that's just using levers. And the thing is today, and this is what terrifies elites, is everybody has a lever. You got more levers on this, right, than the elites of 50 years ago had at their entire disposal across their entire empire. And so, now I am dating myself when I say there used to be a cartoonist named Gary Larson called The Far Side. And, one of his cartoons, this is like, I don't know, 80s, 90s, this middle-aged couple's looking out their window in suburban America, any town, and they look across the street and the husband's like, oh, Edna, the Jones have the bomb now too. And there's like all these nuclear bombs parked in the driveway up the street. Well, everybody's got a nuclear bomb on this now. Everybody's got a nuclear bomb on this laptop. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's terrifying, but it's also empowering. But we live in this new world now where everybody's got the bomb, and that bomb's called AI, and that bomb's called encryption, and that bomb is called, public key cryptography and blockchain. And so now how do we run this world when everybody's got the bomb and everybody's a supercomputer? So,
wow. Pound that like button, everybody. that was more than I expected. And it is so true. It's such a great way of looking at the world. Personal responsibility is the new counterculture, people. Okay. It's a scary freaking world. Learn to take care of yourself. But I do agree that there's this glorious decentralization here. And what I also see is more than ever, people are so willing. 40 years after 1984 was supposed to take place, we have people begging, crying for a comfortable dystopia. Okay, it is a popular. If you're running for office in Canada, I think it's a popular stand to take. I'm gonna take care of you. I'm not in Canada right now, but maybe you can. I don't think it is as if the general population is not as freedom respecting or loving as those of us in America. It was very sad to see what happened during the virus there. Very, very shocking indeed. And obviously you had many takes on that. But I see a world of many people clamoring for government intrusion. And I mean, in the end, don't you see people being just comfortably happy with CBDCs and just totally believing everything the government tells them about it and really vilifying Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. I call it the coming monetary apartheid, where you're going to have basically those who hold their wealth outside of the coming CBDC system and those who are inside it. A huge component of those people inside the system are going to want to be there. Yeah. They're going to enjoy to be there. And, what I speculate is going to happen is, again, with these things, these are not only like supercomputers in your pocket that are empowering, they're also like surveillance mechanisms that can completely enslave you. It's how you react to it and what you do with it. Your life will be gamified in your phone, right? And then your implant, not long after that. And people will be like, these little pretty graphics will happen on screen, and an NFT will explode when you cut your meat consumption to a certain level, or when you euthanize your dog for global warming and stuff like that. And a certain component of people are going to be like all in on that because, again, they want something to be taking care of them. And I think, and maybe this is my maybe it's naive, but I'm an optimistic, but I think it's going to be largely self-selecting, this monetary apartheid. Like, even if you wind up on the wrong side of this out of circumstance, and I say that anyone who's going to be economically reliant on the government for UBI, for welfare, for entitlements, if you rely on the state for your economic sustenance, you're going to be captured within the CBD system. Let's say you get there at first and you're stuck in that system. What I hope for is a world where still in this day and age, in the West, at least in G20 nations, if you really want to improve your lot in life, you have the ability to do so. And I think people who get captured inside the CBDC system will have the ability, if they, to get out of that system. What I worry about is a non-porous membrane between the haves and have-nots. Where you're just sort of stuck on one side or the other. And no matter how badly you screw up, if you're an elite, you get bailed out. And no matter how hard you apply yourself, if you're a digital serf, you can't get through that membrane. I think the only shot we have at something that sort of resembles a just society, not that it's just, is that those who apply themselves can break through that membrane, and those who don't take responsibility for themselves fall into the other side of it. I don't think this is a desirable state of affairs. I just think that's where we're headed. And I don't think it's going to be permanent. I think it's going to last, less than, I don't know. I hate to speculate because things are moving at an accelerating rate, but at some point it all shakes out, and then we have to sort of rebuild on the other side of this. But I think that's sort of the trough we have to slog through on the way there, is this monetary apartheid.
Brilliant term there. It really wakes people up. Now, one reason that we could tear it apart a little bit, because some of the people, in a regular apartheid, it's totally being forced. It is just going to be amazing how many people volunteer for this thing.
Yeah.
For the reasons you said. And it will be interesting to see how non-porous the membrane is for some people. I think it's going to depend on what jurisdiction they're in. I think in the United States, there's going to be no excuse unless you just want to be a complete welfare slave, which I guess, it'll be very tempting to, the UBI and all of that stuff, but it won't be like they won't be able to get into Bitcoin. I think we've already crossed the Rubicon in terms of that option is going to be out there for everyone. It's been, the ETF has really made it okay with many. If Elizabeth Warren became president, we could have some major issues, I guess. But we're not there yet. But you're talking about some pretty extreme situations where people are totally 100% unable to get to Bitcoin. And that's going to really take a repressive government. If the United States was like that, the whole world would already be like that. We would be literally living in 1984 at that point. If
they can't ban, sorry to interrupt, if they can't ban Bitcoin or access to Bitcoin 100% in China, then I don't know any place where it can happen. Who knows? Maybe nobody in North Korea is stacking sats, but I'll bet you there's a few hodlers there too.
What you said about China is what I would generally answer the question as to. If China can't do it, it would take a much smaller version of China, which I guess is North Korea, but they're not a fit. There's always going to be problems with a corrupt, horrifying country like that, where people are going to be able to get through just a little bit. Now, with this in mind, the apartheid and everything, what do you think here in the Western world, where we have people in our space, in the Bitcoin space, that call for the SEC to clamp down on other cryptocurrencies by calling them securities? For me, there's no principle behind it. For these guys that say that there's freedom, I want to talk about the principle of government intrusion. If you're against government intrusion, you should be against it all the time. So what do you think about this? It goes to a broader topic in the space where people are so tribal when it comes to Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it doesn't amaze you that this is the first time in the history of mankind where people have become tribal around currency. That's quite fascinating on one level.
Well, I think so. I'll preface it by saying I think about Bitcoin in different terms than I think about cryptocurrencies, and I'm not. And while I make sort of references to myself as a Bitcoin maxi, because I think Bitcoin is the one preeminent digital asset. I mean, my newsletter was originally called The Crypto Capitalist, right? I rebranded as The Bitcoin Capitalist because of just all of the messes with like FTX and all of that and Celsius. But I don't think it's necessarily the end of the world for a crypto project to be designated as a security, right? Because I think of them differently, where I think of Bitcoin as like a base layer, a protocol level dial tone for this new environment we're in. Crypto projects are more like companies or businesses or investment projects that are doing their own thing. And so that's sort of like an application built on top of this base layer. So one's a commodity. Bitcoin is being treated more like a commodity, and there's a reason why. And I think that works well for Bitcoin, and it works well for the argument of like true decentralization. But if a crypto project is designated as security, like who cares? It's designated as a security. If I take my company public, I'm going to be a security, right? And I've got to file some paperwork, and I have to adhere to a certain set of rules. And like, yeah, that's it. That's the way the system works. What's the, it's not the end of the world. Now, it brings a level of regulatory burden onto a lot of these projects. But, I've been telling my readers for years, it's like, this is not like, you don't just magically press a button and become an anarcho-capitalist utopia. Like, that's just not going to happen. We still have legal systems. We still have regulations. We actually want legal systems and regulations. I think we want rule of law. You want to know that everybody's playing by the same rules. I think where we sort of get into trouble is where policymakers, regulators, and governments are supposed to be acting like referees, but they're acting like saviors and nannies, and that's where we're running into problems. But if you just say, hey, look, here's a set of rules called securities law. And it basically says things like, if you're going to issue yourselves a bunch of units to yourselves before you sell this to the public at large, you have to disclose that, and you have to publish the terms on which you're doing it, and everything like that. If you're going to, have some market moving news coming out, you have to file it publicly before you act on it privately. Like, what's wrong with anything like that? That's basically like, an offside rule in hockey or basketball. It makes sense, and nobody's disputing the logic of these rules. So, cryptos are securities. Yeah, so what? Bitcoin's a commodity. Amen. Okay, like, let's get on with this.
Yeah, but the thing that I do not like is that, first, there's no clarity right now. Like, they're leading these other coins on or whatever. Just say it. Just do it. It's like they're picking winners and losers, and then there are people in our space that like that. They want some to be winners and some, revenge on this one. Get this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between the referee and the nanny, right?
Yes.
The referee, a good impartial referee, just calls them as he sees them, and then the nanny is like picking and choosing at what's best for you.
And that is called economic fascism, when the government picks winners and losers. Just want to throw that out there for everybody. It's, you could tie that into stakeholder capitalism. Also, it's the same way, you ambiguously decide who a stakeholder is. It's just Klaus Schwab, really. He's the stakeholder. So he gets to say how you run there's no private property anymore. I mean, that's lack of respect for private property is amazing how it continues to grow in this world of ours. By the way, Mark is linked to below, his website, his Twitter. Follow him. Obviously a unique beast. Pound that like button, everyone. All right. On another show that you were on, I think it was a Canadian Bitcoin show, I believe you started to talk about Brian Armstrong and Coinbase. And I think we had some common agreements there. What do you think about what Coinbase does and about Brian Armstrong as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that would have been the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast. Shout out to those guys, Len and Joey. Great duo, great show. Yeah, I'm long Coinbase. I broke one of my own investment rules and bought them on IPO day, but I continued to buy them all the way down. So it's not as lopsided for me now. I think Coinbase, I mean, my shorthand for them is they're the Amazon of crypto. I've always liked them. And I find the bearish thesis on Coinbase is a little comical because I think people just continue to look at one aspect of their business, which is the crypto exchange. And they say, oh, Robinhood is going to eat their lunch. Citadel is going to eat their lunch. Like all these companies that have no depth in this new world are going to eat their lunch somehow. Meanwhile, what's Coinbase doing? Coinbase, for one thing, has ensconced themselves into the regulatory framework of blockchain and crypto. Like if there's, if at the end of all this, let's say Liz Warren gets more than 1 out of 320 bills through, and it's a bad crypto bill, Coinbase is going to be the only legal exchange in America. And who wouldn't want to own a piece of that? I don't think it's going to get to that, but, Coinbase is up on Capitol Hill arguing on behalf of the entire space every time one of these things comes out, and they don't get enough light for that. Nobody gives them credit for that. Paul Grewal regularly kicks the crap out of the SEC in court, makes them look like retards, right? On a regular basis. No one gives them credit for that. Coinbase is building their own layer 2 on Base, and they're not tokenizing it. So the biggest argument against a lot of crypto projects is, they're just, bleep coiners. They're just sort of creating their own token, and Coinbase isn't going to do that. But when you look at their stretch goal for what Base is trying to do, 1 second, 1 transaction, 1 cent, when you understand what they're trying to do and think, and then do some math about what if they get, Base operating at like an ACH level of transactions per second or a Visa level of throughput, it's just going to be dizzying what that company can do with Base. And, they've got all the ETF custodies except one, Fidelity, because they built their own. They're everywhere. When the US government tries to dispose of Bitcoin that they've seized in drug busts or whatever, they do it through Coinbase. Like it's just, these guys have such a depth of knowledge of the industry that I just find, like I say, most of the arguments against them are laughable. I don't understand the hostility towards them, but I welcome it because I love being a contrarian. So just keep that hate on Coinbase and we'll just keep going long and strong.
Do you think, on crypto Twitter, Bitcoin Twitter, do you think it stems from lack of experience of some of these young guys that they're just envious of Brian? I mean, what gives here? I see it as an incredible level of hate toward this dude. Because I was around in 2013, and you got to give this guy all the credit in the world. He stepped up to the plate and had this dream of becoming the Amazon of crypto or whatever you want to. Before it was even it was just a dream. He worked hard and. It provided, instead of people wiring money to freaking Mt. Gox in Japan, you could buy it easily just through a company in San Francisco. It was so easy. So what do you think about the end? I mean, do you think there's envy in the space and or just lack of experience, just a bunch of young guys that have never worked in there? You're an entrepreneur, so tell us your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Coinbase came up through Y Combinator, which is a very highly respected incubator in the software space. Paul Graham, he's been an EasyDNS customer for since the beginning. And so just watching that entity from afar is just oh my, these guys are just really every Stripe came out of Y Combinator, all kinds of things come out of Y Combinator. Coinbase came out of Y Combinator. And when I saw that, I realized, again, that depth of knowledge in the space that they had, that, these Wall Street monstrosities like Citadel, who had to get bailed out during GameStop, privately. They just cannot compete at that level. I think so. Like it or not, the zeitgeist today, and I think it's shifting, but I've been wrong about this for a long time. It's kind of, I'll just say it's a tad left of center, right? So we're kind of like, there's a smidge of wokeness, especially in San Francisco and in the tech sector. And Brian Armstrong and Coinbase, they're not woke, and they committed, probably a original sin, which was they sort of culled their employees. They thinned the herd by saying, if you want to do all of this like social justice, personal causes and stuff, you should do it on your time, not on company time. We're not going to embrace all of these causes left, right, and center. Maybe you should take this package and go. And so they offered their workforce deals to just leave. Many did. I think 10 or 15% of the workforce left. And I think that was the hinge moment when Coinbase, I just noticed an uptick in hit pieces and negativity directed towards Coinbase in the mainstream media. I think they made themselves a target. I applaud them for doing it, because they do what a lot of tech CEOs are probably, thinking privately, but maybe afraid to say publicly. And I think that's what fuels a lot of this hostility, is like, oh, Brian Armstrong is not left wing. He's not woke.
Well, there was something else you mentioned. Yeah, the venture capital funding. Let's tie that into here. Why? And the zeitgeist that we're living through today. It seems like class warfare, hating the rich, hating the producers is cool. It's fine. I mean, you can name names. You could be Elizabeth Warren, and you could say, I'm targeting Elon Musk, and that can be cool. I mean, elected government official, this is, it seems like something from Russia or something like that. But what in our space, in the Bitcoin space, what's your take? Not just the mainstream media, but regular guys. Why the hate toward venture capital? Why the vilification of venture capital? It's like people think it's wrong to make a profit. People think you have to be altruistic to get into Bitcoin. What's wrong with making money? It's like you can't say, I got into Bitcoin because I wanted to become rich, or I wanted to preserve my wealth. You can't say that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, that's why I sort of bill myself as an unrepentant capitalist.
There we go.
And even, the hyper successful ones, like even the Warren Buffetts and Buffett and value investing. And I love value investing. I consider myself a value investor, but there's this ethos there of like, you got to make a big pile of money, but you can't actually enjoy any of that money. Right. You got to like walk around in a potato sack, and you've got to like eat TV dinners and live in like the crappy house that you bought in 1940. It's like, hey, I don't have to live like that. Why do I have to work super hard to make all this money and live like that? I could just be broke and live like that, and then I'll have a lot more spare time. So I really don't, the whole point of working hard and striving to get ahead is that so you can have a nice house, so you can send your kids to a private school instead of this nightmare public system. VC, I've never taken VC because it sort of I don't begrudge VCs, other than in this era of cheap money, like fake money, fiat money, going the VC route sort of changes the dynamic of your company. So you're not actually trying to be profitable anymore. We used to joke, EasyDNS has been around since 1998, and we came up during the dot-com boom, and our joke used to be, we make money the old-fashioned way, at a profit, okay? Because once you take VC, profits are out the window, right? Jason Fried from Basecamp used to joke about this. Like, we go for a funding round, but we're too profitable, so no one's giving us the valuation. You take VC, and suddenly your business model isn't about turning a profit anymore. It's just about entering into this long pipeline of serial funding events, all up rounds. And then at the end, there's some terminal event like a monster acquisition or an IPO. At no point are you making any profit. You're just gobbling mind share, gobbling market share, selling at a loss. That's always been my historical beef against VCs, in the sense that I've got to compete with this company over here that's got 300 million in VC in the bank, Super Bowl ads, and they're selling at a loss. And I don't want to go that route. And so I have to turn a profit. And that's my beef with VCs. But that said, I do not begrudge people for wanting to become wealthy. I do not begrudge people for wanting to enjoy the fruits of their wealth, as long as they do it ethically. And I find that, accumulating wealth and becoming materially better off, what you do is you do that most successfully by making as many people around you as wealthy as possible, right? And maybe that's the one sort of ethos you could take away from those hyper rich people like the Warren Buffetts, is like, he would just empower his managers to run their subsidiaries, and they would become wealthy, and he would by proxy. And then at the end of the day, the way capitalism is supposed to work, even at the base layer of a transaction, is both parties have to derive mutual benefit. That's the alchemy. That's how you get more from what you start with, is when both sides get more. They finish the transaction better off than they started. That's the alchemy of capitalism. And then you multiply that and you iterate that, and you're basically providing values. That's the way it should ultimately work.
I think one takeaway from the VC stuff, I think it's great that people, if that's the way they're going to get funding, then let them get funding that way. What's been lost, and I think what you reminded us of, is that there are a lot of young people that get into business. They think they just want to flip. They just want to come up with an idea, flip it to a VC. They don't care if it's profitable. Back in the day, before all this big VC money, you did it the old-fashioned way. You made a profit. You created that. It's that basic monetary principle of just making a profit in order to fund the growth of your business, not doing it through any debt mechanisms, has been forgotten by so many young people. And with that in mind, amazingly enough, we could say the dot-com boom was in 1998. That's now 26 years ago. So we have people in our space that weren't even born then.
Yeah.
So it has been forgotten. So when you start talking about the dot-com, you might not even realize it now, but you are giving a perspective that a lot of people have no clue about now, that are key, that are big players in this space. So very quick, the compare and contrast the dot-com era to Bitcoin, and how much bigger and maybe how much faster this is going to happen, because that was spread out, and it took a while to get from Netscape to social media, really, to social media being dominant. I mean, you could say that was from like 1995 to 2010. That's quite some time. I mean, I personally think in the fifth, Bitcoin is going to grow. You can call it cryptocurrency. And yes, I do understand the difference between cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, but we're going to have to admit there are going to be all these other digital assets out there. But the space is going to, I think, because of the internet-based level that was built in 1998, those days during the dot-com boom, that this boom, this life-altering, world-changing moment can happen faster. So a quick compare and contrast to the two eras.
Yeah. So I got my first internet job, I think, in 1994. I was working for one of Toronto's first dial-up ISPs called InfoRampNet. So I'm truly dating myself there. And
well, it's also very important to point out what the first internet companies were, how basic it shows. So just everybody that's like, dude, this Bitcoin is just going to get so much more complex. Then we're going to laugh at this stuff one day. But continue. We don't. Right now we're working on dial-up type of stuff that's going to be totally out of date in 5 years. But
yeah, I mean, definitely so. It's still very, in 1998 or 2000, I was at a friend's place who was actually the founder of Toronto's first dial-up ISP. And he was showing me this new software application that could load what he called a web page. I think it must have been 95. It was called Mosaic, right? And it was like this really cool thing. And he said, we're in the Edison stage right now, right? And this was the mid 90s. I was going to say something. I lost my train of thought, but I will point out that
you were saying what your first job was at first.
Yeah, when I got wind of the internet, right? I was destined. I took computer programming at Fanshawe College in London, Ontario, and I was headed for doing Y2K maintenance programming on COBOL mainframes, right? And suddenly I got wind of the internet. Long story. I don't want to go on the tangent here. And I just almost stumbled upon it by picking up a copy of Mondo 2000 magazine in a bookshop on the way to school one day. And I was walking around Toronto, broke, didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, and I had no idea how I was going to do it, but I used to lose sleep pacing around going, how am I going to break into this industry? How am I going to get into this business? I don't even know where it is. I don't know who in Toronto is in this business. And there was this excitement about it that I just knew it was going to be big. I knew it was just going to change the entire world. So to hell with Y2K COBOL maintenance, right? Anyway, so I managed to fortunately and with gratitude get into the business. And I saw a lot of things come and go since then, right? Big point cast and push technology and all this stuff, all these fads came and went. And it wasn't until actually, it took me till 2013 to discover Bitcoin. Actually, I missed it for 5 years. And that was the next time I ever had that feeling again. It was like, I recognized it instantly. It was like, this is the exact same thing that I went through in 1993, 1994. And I found myself, fortunately, I was in a different position. So I wasn't like walking around with like, on a budget, of like enough to buy a pack of cigarettes and a king can of beer and a slice of pizza, which is what I was living on in like 1993. Now I had a company. And so I started sponsoring Let's Talk Bitcoin. And I met, Adam and Stephanie and Andreas and became great friends with them. And it was like, I knew it was going to be big, like the moment I looked at it. Now, the pace, right? The most important book I think I ever read was Alvin Toffler's Future Shock, which came out in 1970. And I didn't read it until I was maybe 20 years old, right? 1990. And it basically said that the biggest thing that the future generations were going to have to get used to was the increasing pace of change, right? So what happened, what took the internet, 20 years to do, is happening in like 2 halving cycles in Bitcoin, right?
Yes.
And, it's just, and then what comes after Bitcoin? I don't know. I'm still trying to keep up with this one. Right. But
I mean, it's amazing. AI is
AI and then nanotechnology and then who knows, right?
It's awesome. So yeah, I agree with the pace. It's such an exciting time to be alive to see the pace picking up like this of all sorts of cool technologies. So do you think the opportunity is greater now for a young person than it was back then?
100%. Okay. 100%. I mean, so I tell my readers, I'll go through this quickly. So there was this book I read in the early 90s that I sort of it helped refine my approach, like as a business, like to become a business owner. And it was like, what self-made millionaires think, say, and do, right? And it basically, I said, you can sum up the book in 3 words: own a business, right? But when you read the book, he says, you do this, you follow this framework, you may have a full-time job now, you can't quit, that's fine. It'll take you 7 years to become a self-made millionaire. And if you really hustle and grind, you can probably do it in 5, okay? I think in this day and age, right, if you can read, you have the tools available to you for free. Actually, you don't even have to read if you've got YouTube. You can probably do it in 3 years. right? And some people, you hear these Cinderella stories about these people who do it in like 18 months. It's just never been more possible to build a business, even a kitchen table business, even a side hustle, and turn it into a 6 or 7 figure, entity that you could just keep or sell or,
Yeah, it is amazing. Hang on, did we lose connection there for a second?
I noticed something changed with my camera. I don't know if I bumped my
Okay, no, we're good.
not,
We're good. We'll keep pursuing. Sorry for the technical difficulties there.
Yeah.
I do want to say what you said about the feeling that you had. It's the same .com feeling that you had. A lot of people who are around and say it's the same thing. Like this is they just know it in their gut. It is revolutionary. Now, if we're talking about the pace of change picking up, let's go back to economics real quick with the United States dollar. I strongly feel from my travels around the world and just having some experience that the US dollar will remain the world reserve currency. I don't think Bitcoin will become the world reserve. It's the world reserve cryptocurrency, but I don't think it will become the world reserve currency. I think actually that the United States CBDC will strengthen its position as the world reserve currency. I think that the BRICS are basically a joke other than China. Where do people try to move? Do they try to move to South Africa? Do they try to move to India? Or do they try to move to the United States and the West? What's going on here? So but there are so many in our space that seem to you want America to be depicted as the most evil entity in the history of mankind, and that it is going to fall. This will be glorious. Everyone will adopt Bitcoin, and the BRICS are a glorious threat. Who cares about the dictators? Who cares about the poverty? Who cares about people trying to get the heck out of those third world? You know what? No. Yeah, it's the USA. So, what's your take on the BRICS? What's your take on the vibe, the anti-Western vibe among some people in our space, and world reserve currency and the United States dollar?
I'm going to break out that into 2 things, right? USD, USA. All right. 2 separate things. For the USA, I'll say it's always astonished me how much my own thinking on this has evolved over the years, right? I used to be this left-wing Canadian, like America is an evil empire. And my biggest fear was that America would someday invade Canada and take us over for our resources. And I now think if you set aside the sort of prevailing governance of both countries, I actually think the smart next level move is for Canada and America to merge. Right?
Yes.
And as much as I don't like centralization, and I know that there's sort of like a dissonance there between centralization and the idea of a North American merger, I think, well, you know what, if you actually took the construct of the original US Constitution, where it was really 50 decentralized sovereign states, and applied it to North America, you would have a global powerhouse, right there. I mean, and then just the real politic of today's world, with an ascendant China and Russia looking out for their own interests. I mean, I understand why China and Russia are doing what they're doing, because it's just sort of like, it's rational self-interest. They're not by any stretch of the imagination libertarian utopias. I mean, they're dictatorships. They're authoritarians. You have no real civil rights there. So let's make no mistake. The place that enshrines, at least in theory, civil rights and freedom and personal freedom is, United States, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Canada, it's like peace, order, and good government, right? It kind of shows you the difference between the 2 mottos. But, I actually think that if the original ethos of the U.S. Constitution is a marvelous thing. We've never seen anything like it. If we can get back to that, that would be great. On the dollar, I mean, if you're in the software industry or the software as a service or infrastructure in business like I am, you understand long tails and you understand how long it takes for something to decline to zero, right? So the US dollar, you're right. I mean, you go to Congo, you go to South America, you go someplace and like, in some places they want Bitcoin, but like the US dollar is going to get you pretty well anything you want. The Canadian dollar, like they won't even recognize it. And that's going to happen for a long time. But they are devaluing the thing towards zero. So that's number one. And that's been in play since 1970. And stable coins and CBDCs give a way for all of these central banks to sort of add a couple extra decades of runway onto these melting ice cubes. So that's going to happen. But the other thing is, I'll tell you why my opinion on where Bitcoin fits in all this changed. The other thing is the US dollar. Two things happened in 2022. The United States government weaponized its dollar against foreign reserve holdings, and the Canadian government weaponized its banking system against its citizens, right? Those two things happened fairly close to each other. And when that happened, that changed my opinion on where Bitcoin was headed. So before that, I always thought Bitcoin will never be a world reserve currency, and it will never be part of a new Bretton Woods sequel. It will never be part of a new monetary system layer. I used to think of Bitcoin as a German term called Notgeld. And if you've seen, like I say this on a few different podcasts, Notgeld is a word that translates roughly to emergency money. Every hyperinflation has an emergency money, right? In Weimar, Germany, cities were printing their own script. In Zimbabwe, it was prepaid phone cards and gas cards, right? And I said Bitcoin was a global Notgeld against a global high inflation, hyperinflationary wave that's coming. And I thought that's all it will ever be, right? It'll be important. It'll be around forever, but it's always going to be this informal Notgeld. After those two events, after the US weaponized its status as a reserve currency, and after a G7 country like Canada weaponized its banking system, I said, okay, now Bitcoin is something completely different now. And it's a stretch to think it will ever be a world reserve currency. But someday there's going to be this like, okay, all the finance ministers got together, all the central banks got together. We're creating this new thing. And this thing is this new monetary base layer. And it's got these national currencies, and it's got these SDRs, and it's got these tons of gold, and it's got this component of Bitcoin, and it's going to be like part of the plumbing. And I think that's where it's headed.
Okay, part of the plumbing. I like that. I want to go back to when you said Canada and the United States merging. So I support Alberta at least seceding and joining the United States. Do you like that idea?
I don't see them leaving on their own to join the US. They would just go it alone if they do. And thanks to Trudeau, Canada has spent the last 70 years trying to keep Quebec into confederation because they're incessantly threatening to separate. And now Alberta is going to be gone within all it'll take is one more liberal administration. It won't be the next time because they'll lose. But after that, that'll be the end of Alberta. Job well done, liberals. Yeah. You've destroyed Confederation in record time.
Well, I want to recommend for everybody watching to visit Alberta. Is my favorite province up there. I mean, really freedom-oriented people. Really a good. It's like the Texas of Canada in a certain way. In a certain way. You have to experience it. Definitely, it's during the summer. Obviously, it's hard.
Yeah, shout out to Corey Morgan out there. I did his audio book, The Sovereigntist's Handbook, which so it's the whole blueprint on Alberta sovereignty.
Well, let's conclude with another country here, and that is the situation in Argentina. Mm-hmm. And I was excited about it before he was elected because he talked about. I mean, he's separation of money and state. Separation of money and state. That's the first step right there. that really is an awesome thing. He says the right things. He has principles. He has economic knowledge. A lot of Bitcoiners tell me they want to move to El Salvador.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, dudes, be patient. Maybe you should visit Argentina first and see how it goes if you're so keen on leaving North America. Because first of all, El Salvador, I compare the leader to the leader of Argentina. And I don't want to pedestal anyone, but I really think, again, in our space, it has become so cultish. And so there's been a cult built around this dude from El Salvador who makes Bitcoin trades for his country when he's sitting on the toilet. Now, you compare that to Milei in Argentina, who has a plan, a real legitimate plan, not just volcanoes and, this, that, and the other, but it's just, to me, it's apples and oranges. So I don't know if you want to compare the two, but what do you take? What's your take on what's going on in Argentina?
Well, they've had so many currency collapses there that they, it's nice to see someone come in who says, like, we can't have this anymore, right? I mean, they put out a 100-year bond, in what, like 2017 or something like that, and they had to restructure it within 3 years. Like, it was just like ridiculous. I tell a story in the Crypto Capitalist Manifesto about we found an account on the system that kept pre-funding its balance in credits in our system. Like they prepaid their website out to like 2085, and we're like, what's going on with this customer? And I email him. He turns out to be an Argentine who's putting like half of his paycheck into like prepaid easy DNS credits every paycheck because he found it to be a better store of value than the peso. And I'm like, you can't do that because we're not a bank. But that's the situation there, right? We became the Notgeld for this guy, right? So, some people give hostility to Milei because he wants to peg to the US dollar. And I just see that as like a tactical move to sort of, get some bearing, to get a ballast on the economy there, because they've destroyed their currency. Like these serial devaluations and hyperinflationary events, you've got to start there.
Yeah.
Right. He's also, introduced legislation that made it a lot more Bitcoin friendly as well. He hasn't gone the El Salvador route. I will say making Bitcoin legal tender in El Salvador did a lot for the space. And so you may have issues with Bukele and, some of the people around him. There's some questionable undercurrents there, but at least it happened. It stuck a flag in the ground. I actually, what he did rounding up all the gangs, I can sort of see the sort of pragmatism behind it, but it is kind of it's a civil rights fail, like no trials. You just herd a bunch of people into prison because they have tattoos. I mean, I know you probably got 99.9% accuracy on that, but the fact remains, like, can you just do that? If that happened in Canada, if that happened in Utah, like, we'd have issues. So, props to just making the move to make Bitcoin legal tender. But, maybe what's happening in Argentina is a bit more measured and methodical and has a longer term chance at succeeding because it's just a little more thought through. I mean, people are freaking out because he went to the Davos meeting, and it's like, I don't think you've truly made it in this world until you're called controlled opposition and a psyop. Right. Until then, you're an also ran.
That's a very good point, though. In this crazy paranoid world that we live in, you're not real until they accuse you of being part of some conspiracy But no, very good. There is some long-term thinking going. I think that's the point. I think Argentina, the situation is more long-term thinking. There, it was more impulsive. Hey, but no, it was big. It took Bitcoin to another level by making it. Someone had to be the first to make it the legal tender. Someone had to be the first. And speaking again of Argentina, you have to start somewhere. You can't just be like total financial anarchy now. Just the whole country would come apart. I mean, the first step is dollarization. It's fine. He's got a plan.
There was again, I'm dating myself. There was a punk band called the New York Dolls, and they had an album called Too Much Too Soon. Right. And I love that phrase. And that phrase has been more important in this day and age. Like what happened under COVID was too much too soon. And I actually think that plays out in favor of the liberty movement because it really it was the acceleration event of the century. So we saw where we were headed because it was too much too soon. And if they would have dribbled and drabbled that out over 20 years, we would have just sort of all walked into it. But then we saw it. It just was like shock and awe. And it was like, okay, too much too soon. We don't want this. And there's a lot more liberty-minded people now because of it.
I think that's the conclusion. There's a lot more liberty-minded people now, but there's still plenty of 80%ers who are as blind as they've ever been. What happened with the trucker convoy should have been the ultimate wake-up for Bitcoin, that they tried to send them money. Every which way got shut down except for Bitcoin. That was just such a huge moment for me. I know it did wake some people up, but it should have been the biggest darn story of the year in so many ways, that a country as supposedly free as Canada was shutting down bank accounts like China. I mean, and the only way to get around it was this thing called Bitcoin. I mean, that's
let's dive into this a little bit. I got a little bit of time, so I don't have a hard stop at 12, but I think the Freedom Convoy was far more successful than people give it credit for. That was the beginning of the end of COVID tyranny, for one thing. Okay. By the time the Freedom Convoy was over and done, lockdowns were over within a year. Vaccine mandates were over within a year. Similar movements broke out all over the world. And when the government did try to seize the bank accounts of people who contributed to the Freedom Convoy and the truckers' bank accounts, they almost crashed the banking system. I mean, that goes really underreported. I mean, it was covered on Zero Hedge, and I don't know anywhere else, right? That all of the online banks went offline around the same time. And then, within days, the government sort of walked it back. And that was the cover for that was like mission accomplished. Henry Kissinger's famous line, declare victory and withdraw. What really happened was the Senate wasn't going to pass it. The banking system was in danger of crashing. And they basically had to back down and put a brave face on. So that was a complete and total victory for the truckers. And it was the beginning of the end of COVID tyranny. And now with this latest federal court decision yesterday ruling the whole thing unconstitutional and illegal, it's complete vindication. So I like to hand it to the truckers.
Benjamin is great. That's the reason I know you, is because of him, because of all of that. So I mean, that is a very good take on the situation. Very positive take. For me, I just wish more people would understand it in America. Really. Fully understand it, but no. It's a great spark, and things. I guess the zeitgeist did change a little bit after that, to say the least. And now, well, I mean, we'll see. Can they? I mean, I guess this is a good conclusionary question. What happened during the virus? Will governments attempt to pull it off again? And will they be able to pull it off in Canada? Will they be able to pull it off in the United States? Will they be able to pull it off only in certain countries?
So, I mean, I always kind of bristle internally when people are like, will they do this? Will they do this? Not you, just in general, right? I don't think they are going to do anything because I don't think they did anything. COVID was a lab leak. I don't think it was intentional. I mean, that's just what I think.
Well, I mean, the governments, will they be able to pull off these authoritarian moves?
No, I really don't think so. Not unless they sort of like let everyone go back to sleep for another 10 years and try it like a long time from now, maybe. But people are like, oh, disease X is going to be unleashed this year. Like, no, people are going to tell the government.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's going to be another disaster of some sort. And it'll be natural or whatever. It doesn't matter. I don't think they're going to create. No one's going to create a disaster. We have disasters. Will governments take the opportunity again to end, the Klaus Schwabs of the world, to take advantage? You have to take advantage of a disaster. What's it called? What's the?
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
Never let a good crisis go to waste seems to be. I mean, that was taken to an extreme in 2020. Okay,
they will.
And Klaus, the World Economic Forum, even admits it. This is the time for a reset. This is the time for no conspiracies at all. They said this is a time for an economic reset. Will the next so-called disasters that will be hyped up by the media because they make money off of hyping up disasters? Will some countries be able to take authoritarian control? I don't think it can work in the United States again because we have 50 separate. I think in certain states it might work more than others, but more people will leave. I don't know about Canada. That's why I'm asking you. But I think it's like in certain countries, sure, the dictators will become bigger dictators. Here, I think there's enough people, maybe 20% of the people would violently rebel if they had to. I mean, that threat would be legitimate. I don't say to do anything like that, but
I think they will try. A government like Canada, if it's still like, a left-wing coalition like we have now, would certainly try. Whether the conservatives who talk a good game now, when the proof is put to the test, will they stay with it? They'll try. I mean, governments will try. Governments have one move in the playbook, right? Two moves: print money and exert control. So yeah, that's a given. But will the population acquiesce the way they did last time? I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think the people who are like ideologically aligned with that kind of subservience are actually a minority. And I think during COVID, people, because of the whole cancel culture zeitgeist, people were afraid to say, you know what, this is kind of BS. I'm not really on side with this. I don't really believe it. I don't really care who thinks I'm a nutcase for not believing it. They didn't feel safe to say it. And now it's practically fashionable to say it now. So I think it happens again anytime in the next few years. I think governments are going to be surprised at the lack of compliance. And the one thing I've always said about COVID, if we get hit with a virus that has a real rate of lethality, right? And a real rate of contagion, you're not going to need mandates. Exactly. You're not going to need lockdowns. You're not going to need any of this because an undistorted market, and in this sense, I'm just talking about the free flow of signals, activity would just drop right down. People would just distance naturally. We knew very early on that this thing, it was serious and it was big, but you know what? It's not civilization ending and we can get through this. The market already knew that as early as like April or May of 2020.
Yes. Right? Yes.
So, I think people will, I really do have faith that a much larger chunk of the population would just say like, no, we're not sitting. You can't lock down my business. Are you insane? Like, no.
Well, I just want to add to people who have not seen my channel before, because you tweeted this out, that if people go back to my archives of 2020, I was not afraid because I owned Bitcoin. My whole life was in Bitcoin. I knew I could not be canceled. I was saying all this stuff. I got kicked off of YouTube for 3 months because I did. Yeah, but this channel did. But I had a backup. I kept doing shows every day, saying what you're saying. Indeed, the market did know by about May, because you remember March the 13th. There was of 2020 blood in the streets. Trump is panicking. Everybody's selling. Everybody's selling Bitcoin. People of my channel know this story. I bought 2 Bitcoin within 24 hours. I spent $10,000 on 2 Bitcoin. Now that's worth, what is it, $80,000 or whatever combined. So no. But by May, Bitcoin and many stocks, people thought it was the end of the world on March the 13th. By May the 13th, people who weren't crying to their mommies anymore, real people, everything started recovering, and that's how the rich got richer. The smart, the long-term thinking people got richer, because if you actually thought with your darn head 2 months after that, you knew it was so. There was no excuse for a clear thinking person. And again, you're absolutely right. A real virus, no, I'm not going to go outside if people are really dropping dead. I was outside every single day because it was totally fine. Continue. Sorry.
I got a bolt after this, but in January, I have emails in my sent box, January 2020. I'm emailing friends telling them, I want you to go to the hardware store and pick up N95 masks. I want you to stock up on provisions, medications, and start making arrangements to keep track of your relatives and your neighbors. I was wearing an N95 mask in grocery stores in February and getting weird looks, right? I was keeping a spreadsheet in March about official death statistics, ICU admissions, and stuff like that. I was taking them from official sources: City of Toronto, Province of Ontario, Government of Canada, Government of US, and Government of Barbados, because my wife's family is Barbadian. By April, in March, I knew my spreadsheets taking the doubling times that the World Health Organization put out. I said, okay, by the end of August, we're going to have something like 85,000 fatalities in Toronto alone. And this is really bad. I was afraid, right? This could be the plague. By April or May at the latest, I'm updating this spreadsheet every day. And I'm like, this model is bust. This is not going to happen like this, right? This is not as bad as we think it is, right? So all you had to do was look at the data. And I thought this was good news. I thought this is amazing because surely there's scientists and actual experts following this same data going, okay, everything is cool. Stay home if you can. And, everyone just sort of chill and let's just load up on vitamin D and we'll get through this. I thought this is not going to be civilization ending. And the hysteria just accelerated. And then we got the lockdown eras for 2 years. And the vaccine mandates.
So ridiculous. But hey, we made it through it. And right now you got to go. So give your conclusionary remarks, talk about your business real quick, what you're doing. Again, he's linked to below. Mark, you've been a great guest. Take it away.
Hey, thanks for having me, Adam. I'll come on anytime you would like. So my day job is I run a web services company called EasyDNS. If you want a domain name website, VPS to run a Noster relay or a BTC pay server, just head on over to EasyDNS. I'll create a coupon code. Let's call it BitcoinMeister.
Or just Meister maybe.
Meister, okay. So we'll create a coupon code for that. My blog is bombthrower.com. Get on the free mailing list there. I got a premium newsletter at the BitcoinCapitalist.com, and I am Stunt Pope on Twitter and Bomb Thrower on Noster. So it's been great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're a true unique beast. All right, everybody, that is it. I'm Adam Meister, BitcoinMeister, Disrupt Meister. Subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter at TechBalt. I'd say Shabbat Shalom. It's not Friday yet. Happy Tu B'Shvat tomorrow. See you, everybody, later. Take care. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Adam.
All right.